What's going on, everybody? We have a hell of a segment for you. Now, I would ask you all very kindly if you could bear with me, and the reason why is because when I tell you we have like a lot of information um, about this Bolivia conflict, it's a hell of a lot of information that I'm going to try my best to string together, but also will be doing subsequent segments along with the rest of the MCSC family in order to make sure. Excuse me, I'm just sharing this. But I'm just going to be doing other segments with the rest of the MCSC family to kind of go into the details of what I'm gonna talk about here. But if I wanted to go into every detail of all the damn the rabbit holes that this Bolivian coup had, it would literally take like 3 hours. It would be like a 3 hour video to do it, and honestly, that probably wouldn't even be enough. So I'm gonna give the best, most comprehensive breakdown that I can give, and then from there, of course, as more details come out, as we find more information, and as the situation in Bolivia evolves, we'll go ahead and cover those as well. So, with that being said, and by the way, can y'all share this, like this, share it, subscribe if you're not subscribed yet, and we'll go ahead and get this show on the road. So, first thing we want to talk about: who is former president of Bolivia, Evo Morales? So a lot of people, at least in the West, I should say, or not in the West, the United States, don't have a good picture of who Evo Morales is. So, of course, as most of you have probably figured out by now, he is a leftist. He does claim himself to be a socialist. He's actually part of the movement for socialism, that party in Bolivia. So, what was he before president? Well, he was a former cocoa farmer. Pretty modest guy. He is also the very, very first indigenous president. So obviously, as you know, indigenous rights all over the country, or excuse me, all over this hemisphere and all over America, and I don't mean the United States, but Central and South America and Canada, indigenous rights have been suppressed and oppressed across the board. And so it's always important when the indigenous people get a leader to represent them in office. So it was a big deal when he got elected. He's won every election handedly after an economic boom, sending Bolivia's first satellite to space, using their lithium supply to expand the economy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He also, at the United Nations, spoke out against all of Trump's, let's just call them problems. He spoke out against Trump holding kids at the border. He spoke out against Trump's attempted coup of Venezuela. He spoke out in support of Lula. He spoke out in support of Maduro. He's also spoke out in support of Bernie Sanders, actually. So generally, I think that we can all agree he's, as far as the left is concerned, he's one of the good guys. He said he was hoping that lithium would serve as an economic engine to help Bolivia get out of poverty. And that's really important for what we're going to talk about going forward. Now, what is the big hullabaloo about Evo Morales and his fourth term, or what would have been his fourth term had the military not established a coup and forced him to resign, where he then had to go? He's actually about to go to Mexico, I believe. Oh, he just got accepted into Mexico for asylum. So, and a lot of his cabinet has as well. The hullabaloo is that Morales was technically on his fourth term. Technically, his first term was actually cut short because of a constitutional amendment, which is what allowed him to run for 2 consecutive terms, unchallenged by any constitutionalists. And then, of course, he ran for the 4th term. Now, as a brief overview, understand that, like I just said, Evo Morales is the first indigenous leader of Bolivia and is also a self-described socialist. With that title, history has shown us that title comes with issues. Not unlike what we have seen Maduro and Chavez face, not unlike what we have seen Lula face in Brazil, not unlike what we see the Mexican leader facing right now, not unlike what we saw before the coup in Honduras. So like when just those two titles alone, I'm not gonna give you all the details yet, you know that there are problems. A lot of the times, whenever people in a significantly oppressed and arguably third world country finally find a leader who will stand up for them against the American empire and multinational corporate interests, they tend to like them staying in power because it is very, very difficult to find a leader who not only can stand up to American imperialism or Western imperialism in general, but also can win the fight, right? It's very rare that we have seen that. And when these countries finally do get somebody who can stand up to Western imperialism, they like to keep them in. It was like this with Chavez. It was like this with Maduro. It was like this with Fidel Castro. This is just how it has always worked. And realistically, I know we like to think of things from the a United States centric perspective, but when you know for a fact as a person, you're like, I don't know everything about politics. I don't know everything about my government. I don't know everything about the economic situation in my country, but I do know this. I know a lot of my problems usually originate from somebody, whether it be a corporation, a politician, et cetera, from the United States or its allies trying to interfere in our nation's affairs. Everybody, they at least have a sense of that. And when you get that sense, you, like I said, when you have an opportunity to get a leader who will stand up to the U.S. imperialist interests, then they like to keep him in. So that's what happened. So he was in his fourth term after having his term cut short. Then because of that, being able to win 2 more terms, and then of course, then winning this 4th term. Now, the 4th term was highly disputed. What happened was the majority party, which was Morales' party technically, in the legislature, they introduced a referendum. The referendum said that they wanted to amend the Constitution to extend term limits to being unlimited. Now, that was defeated. It was actually defeated, surprisingly enough. It was defeated by a 51% vote. Like that's what it was defeated at the ballot, and it was defeated at 51% of the vote. Weirdly enough, and this is important for you to remember, the OAS, which is the Organization of American States, was quick to jump on it. They were like, oh, you got to accept these terms. You got to accept this. That's going to be woefully ironic as we go on. So even though the country had a 51% vote that determined that the referendum should not go through, it got taken to the Supreme Court. All right. So I want to give you a little bit of information about the referendum. The Supreme Court overturned this referendum, but it hasn't been exactly portrayed in the way that a lot of the people who are trying to denigrate Morales or his party are saying it is. They're like, oh man, that was an it's a corrupt Supreme Court, and they stacked the Supreme Court and they overturned something that was, done by the people. It was super contentious. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, people. In every single country, there is a high level of propaganda from the left and the right, but most of the propaganda, if we're being honest, does come from the right, because the right usually represents U.S. interests and Western European interests as well. And of course, Bolivia is no different. Just like you have an opposition in Brazil, just like you have an opposition in Venezuela, just like you had the opposition in Chile, Honduras, and some people are tricked into believing that these people, these corporate stooges, these right-wing stooges, are actually working on their behalf, there's always going to be, everything done is going to be highly contentious, but that's not what we should be looking at. We should be looking at the substance and the facts, and then making our determination as to, if it was illegitimate what the Supreme Court did. By my estimation, the Supreme Court didn't do anything crazy, actually, which is ironic. It's ironic because everybody is like, all of a sudden, we should allow military coups whenever we disagree with someone else's Supreme Court. Why was the referendum overturned? Well, the Supreme Court actually didn't change anything. That's what people didn't know. And we're here breaking the news, okay? We're here breaking the news. It didn't do anything. I know a lot of people think that, but they didn't. And here's why. All it did, all the Supreme Court did was uphold a previous ruling from the year prior that cited the American Convention on Human Rights, stating that elections should have absolutely no restrictions. What the American Convention on Human Rights is a pact signed in 1969 by many Organization of American States, the OAS, members, including Mexico, Venezuela, Chile, and Brazil, but it is, of course, open to all OAS member states. Now, what does that mean? Once again, and I'm going to go into the importance of the OAS, but basically, the OAS is at the center of all of this. And the Supreme Court actually they upheld precedent, right? That's the kind of the norm for Supreme Court in any country. I don't think people know that. It takes an overwhelming amount of evidence to overturn any Supreme Court decision in any country. And just like in the United States, we can write something in the Constitution. We can, right? However, the Supreme Court can determine if it is indeed constitutional or if it upholds human rights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or civil rights. That is what we call, in the world of civics, checks and balances. The Supreme Court of Bolivia decided to not change anything. That's the narrative that needs to be corrected in regards to that. Okay, the Supreme Court didn't change anything. People were saying, "Oh, they overruled." They didn't overturn a referendum. Well, technically, I guess they did overturn the referendum, but I don't like using that term because it creates this false narrative that they changed something. They didn't overturn the referendum. What they did, or the referendum vote, what they did was decide, well, to be honest with you guys, we should have never been debating this referendum to begin with, because precedent determined last year that nobody was paying attention to, because that's what happens in politics. Nobody pays attention until shit blows up. Precedent set last year by the Supreme Court of Bolivia said there should be no restrictions on constitutions because of a treaty, an international treaty that was signed by Bolivia, and that it must abide by like every other country in that treaty. The OAS is extremely important to the region, in good and bad, a lot of bad ways, but some good ways too. And so they had to think of international implications in their decision along with the referendum vote. Now, there is an argument going around that the Supreme Court was somehow illegitimately stacked by Morales. And to be completely honest with you, I have seen this argument mostly being made by Americans. I think that everybody agrees with me there, right? Everybody who has made this argument is thinking about it from a U.S.-centric standpoint, because we know that our politicians in the state, most specifically the Democrats and Republican presidents, always try and stack the court in their favor. I mean, I think that's kind of inherent. That's why you have parties. And although I don't agree with this idea of stacking courts, I don't agree with the idea of a president actually being able to appoint Supreme Court justices. Even if the Senate and the House has to approve of it, well, of course they're going to approve of it. If I'm the president and I'm a Democrat, what Democrat is going to vote against the Democratic leaning Supreme Court justice that the popular Democratic candidate who just won presidency and therefore is the head of the Democratic Party, just appointed? Like, that's not going to happen. So I'm against any type of just self-appointment and then having the party majority that also won agreeing with me, the leader of their party. However, I know we think that's how it, we know that's how it works in the United States. It's not exactly how it works in Bolivia. And this should be if you're wondering, like, or if you encounter people who are dealing with, who are engaging with that talking point, then you should know these facts. The Bolivian judiciary, the Supreme Court specifically, is comprised of judges that were not introduced by the president, but was instead introduced by Bolivia's Senate. Now, does Morales probably have some say-so in what the dominant party says about who they want to see sitting in those Supreme Court justice seats? Probably. I mean, like, let's not be naive. However, the Supreme Court justices are selected by a list of candidates introduced by the Senate, and then Bolivia's chief of deputies, or what we would call House of Representatives, has to approve that list. And then, of course, they only get 10-year terms. Oh my God, how much better would American politics be if Supreme Court justices only got 10-year terms? That would be absolutely amazing. But now, what does that mean, practically speaking, in reference to this referendum? Well, a lot of people's arguments is that there were some shady dealings in court stackings. No, that's not what it means. Unless there is an argument being made that election fraud or election integrity issues arose in the legislature's elections and what we will call the House, quote unquote, or their Chamber of Deputies elections, then there is no argument to be made about illegitimately stacking the court. It would actually mean, because those judges were introduced on a list by the legislature and then voted on a list by the legislature, that those Supreme Court justices more than likely represent the interests of the people who voted in the legislature. That's what that means. And they would once again have a little bit more of a leg to stand on using that argument if, one, Morales was the one who selected the court justices, but that's not the case. He didn't select them. He did not appoint them. And two, if they made a major a groundbreaking decision that overturned a previous like if right now, for example, Roe v. Wade was overturned, we would immediately be able to make an argument that Trump is Republican, Trump has a Republican government, he put in judges specifically that could be used to his political advantage, that we knew for a fact we're going to get appointed, we're going to get approved by the House and the Senate because they're also dominated by Republicans. And Trump appointed the justices and he's a Republican. And so, of course, we would say that ruling is illegitimate. It's just a party, it was pandering by a Republican Party who had control of all the branches of the government, but also the Supreme Court justices were appointed by that Republican leader of a Republican government. That is not the case here. It was a Senate that was voted in by the people indisputably, in a House that was voted in by the people indisputably, who clearly represent the majority of the people in their interests, who then introduced a list and voted on it and put in judges that represent the interests of the people. So that argument falls flat on its face. Now, with that being said, I know a lot of you are probably wondering, well, Niko, this seems a little bit too random. I wonder if there's just, this follows the pattern that we have seen in the past. Because every time a socialist leader, usually an indigenous person or a mestizo, a person of color, if you will. Every time one of those leaders get in power and they're really successful, for some reason, there's always a coup attempt. Every single time. And usually the people behind that coup are related in some way, form, or fashion to the United States. And ladies and gentlemen, your instincts are right as usual, because there has been leaked audio released where this coup attempt was discussed by the leader of the opposition and some very famous people. Some of the names you might recognize as being involved regularly and often in US-backed coup attempts in South America. This is from the article. Local media pointed out that local media pointed out that the destabilizing plan would have been coordinated by the United States Embassy in Bolivia prior to the elections, and cites, you're gonna love this one, U.S. Senators Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, who are said to have direct contact with the Bolivian opposition in the strategy to overthrow Morales. What a surprise. The most famous Latin American Uncle Toms, often associated with coup attempts of socialist governments in South America, are involved with overthrowing another socialist in South America. It's almost like we could have seen that coming a mile away. Oh my God, what a surprise. The article goes on to say, the plan focuses on the fact that if Evo Morales won the elections on October 20th, a civil military transition government would be established. The new government would allege fraud in the electoral process and would not recognize Morales' electoral victory. So literally, no matter what happened, they expected Evo Morales to win because Evo Morales was incredibly popular. So they had planned in advance. They knew he was going to win, and their immediate plan was to delegitimize the election. Isn't that interesting? So basically, we have seen multiple attempts to take this guy out, because at first I thought it was about election integrity. I thought it was about upholding the Constitution. I thought it was about upholding rule of law. That is what right-wing opposition in Bolivia have stated. Carlos, what is it? Carlos Mendez? I can't remember the guy's name. I think it's Carlos Mendez. But basically, his opposition and other right-wing leaders in Bolivia were saying the referendum issue was a matter of election integrity. It was a matter of upholding the Constitution and upholding institutions and rule of law and da, da, da. Okay, but your institution, your political institution, just ruled to agree with the international treaty. You don't like it, but just because you don't like it doesn't mean you get to start a military coup. That's not how politics works. That's not how rule of law works. If you don't like it, then you appeal it, you challenge it, you get better lawyers. I don't know, but you go through the correct political channels to make it happen. Here's the problem, though. If you think about it rationally, if you're from the right, which is what Morales' opposition is, and a Supreme Court full of leftist judges just said, hey, man, if you keep winning elections, then guess what? You get to stay in power. It's that easy. Just win. All you have to do is win. Oh, but here's the problem. If you are on the right, you've been trying to win, remember? You've been trying, but you can't beat Morales. He's been president since 2008. And that means the people keep voting him in. But it isn't like he's just been president. The movement for the Socialist Party has maintained the majority of the time, which also means not only is Morales winning, but the Socialist Party there is winning. And that's what the people want. They can't keep winning if it's not what the people want. In other words, the right knew their policies were so ridiculous and that the people were seeing right through them that they could never win. They could never beat Morales in a legitimate election. And therefore, because of that Supreme Court ruling, it meant that Morales and the Socialist Party, the left-wing party, the party that was taking care of the people, the party that was taking care of the indigenous, the party that was taking care of the disenfranchised, they would never be out because the people all knew that the right was full of shit as usual. And that's what freaked them out. And they pretended like it was about election integrity. They pretended like it was about a right wing, they pretended like it was about upholding institutions and all that good stuff. And then it shifted. It wasn't about that. It was, it's a kangaroo court now. It's a banana republic. Which one is it? It's about the fact that the right has tried, they played all their cards and nothing worked. So they had to do a military-backed coup. So the article does go on to say, and also clearly, I mean, if Marco Rubio's name comes up, you know what time it is, right? Marco Rubio was the point man, America's point man in Venezuela, if you all recall, standing next to a bunch of food where they were claiming that, remember that picture where Marco Rubio standing next to a bunch of food in Colombia saying, why won't Maduro let these food and supplies in to Venezuela? And it turned out that Colombian government, that Colombian government, who was a U.S.-backed Colombian government, had confiscated all those goods and resources from Venezuela, and that's why they had them. So anytime Marco Rubio is involved, you know what time it is. And they planned this in advance. That's what the recordings show. By the way, I'm going to have links upon links upon links to this in the description. So you'll be able to go look at all this stuff. But that's what the recordings show. They knew that, they already knew Morales was about to win. Good stuff, right? It gets better though. It says weeks ago in a speech, President Morales, who was apparently clairvoyant, had referred to alleged coup plans and that his government had the recordings. Neither the opposition nor the United States Embassy has referred to the leakage of the audios. In other words, Evo Morales had been warning us because he had heard the recordings. Evo Morales warned us of his coup because he heard the recordings, the same recordings that are now public. The link will be in the description after I get done here. And it's exactly what he said. It is exactly what he said. So why wasn't anything done about this? Why wasn't there international news about the attempted coup attempt of a Bolivian president? But it's funny because the Supreme Court was stacked narrative, that got out quick, huh? Bolivians were mad about the Supreme Court, and that's what this is really about that referendum, about unlimited terms. He was trying to be a dictator. No. You can't be a dictator based off of a Supreme Court decision where the Supreme Court is appointed by the legislature. That's not how dictatorships work. Okay, just want to let everybody know. So he warned us in advance. No news covered it. Nobody covered it. I can't stress this enough. When there is audio, official audio, government found, okay, the government had this, and it's the audio was saying, hey y'all, we working with the United States, specifically Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, about a coup. Everybody should pay attention because we're about to start a coup in Bolivia on Evo Morales, and he's never going to see it coming. I feel like everybody there should be a whole news cycle about that, right? Especially when you find out United States senators are involved at heading up the coup. But it gets better. Now, there's an organization that was in charge of auditing this electoral process. And this organization is called the Organization of American States. Remember, I told you I've referenced them a few times in the beginning of the video and said they were going to be very, very important. Now, who runs the OAS? Luis Almagro. Now, some of you probably wondering immediately, well, is this guy a friend, a foe? You know, is he a puppet? Of course he is. He's in charge of an international organization where the decisions made in that organization could directly affect U.S. interests. You think that we're going to let a leftist in charge of a democratic institution? No, hell no. Listen, Almagro is the same leader of the OAS who fervently backed the U.S. coup in Venezuela, and he has been known to only support U.S. interests, and he makes sure to punish the adversaries of the United States. Oh, what a surprise, right? You think that he would still be in charge if he didn't play ball with us? Come on, I know better than that. He also helps maintain the. And by the way, you want to stick around because it's about to get good. It's about to get real good. So he also helps maintain the corrupt U.S.-backed regime in Honduras. Just to give you a little background information. For example, many experts declared that the election in 2017 was very illegitimate. There were massive protests, huge protests, election fraud galore. I mean, you gotta think about it. This is post-coup, post-Clinton State Department coup Honduras. Of course it was election rigging. Come on, the same guy that nobody liked is still in charge. Now, even after they were considered illegitimate, even after election integrity experts considered them illegitimate, even after the massive protests considered them illegitimate, the OAS determined, well, the election is too dirty to call. Huh? What you mean the election was too dirty to call? If the election was too dirty to call, doesn't that mean you should annul the election? That's what that usually means, I thought. And an ironic twist, the same OAS who said the Honduras elections of 2017 were too dirty to call, there was a clear outcome in the elections in Bolivia, and it didn't matter. Didn't matter because all of a sudden the OAS developed a conscience and decided we have to be assertive on election integrity, even though there was no election integrity issues. And he decided we have to annul the Bolivian elections. That's what they demanded. So the elections in Honduras with the corrupt U.S.-backed coup was too dirty to call for the OAS. But the elections in Bolivia, where the, surprise, surprise, the same popular candidate who won handedly the last 3 times won again. Oh my God. Those were too dirty to call. Or excuse me, that has to be annulled. That one has to be annulled. Now, that election in Honduras was actually led to a lot of like a large scale protests that the United States media largely did not cover, which is interesting because 40 people were actually killed in that protest. And it wasn't 40 people killed by like random riots, but 40 people killed by the Honduran military and police force. So it wasn't something small. Okay? And it didn't get covered. And the OAS had no problem with it. They were perfectly fine with everything happening there in that super illegitimate election. Now, Luis Almagro, leader of the OAS, was also allied with the Mexican government. Right? That sounds good, right? The Mexican government now is pretty damn good. Oh, just kidding. He was allied with the old fascist US-backed Mexican government. The new Mexican government refused to play ball with him, as exemplified with their refusal to back his pro-Venezuela regime change efforts, and of course, their denial of recognizing Juan Guaido as the interim president. So when the U.S. backs the leader, for some reason, the OAS just loves them. They love them. But when we don't like them, when they're usually leftists, that's when we don't like them. When we don't like them, and they're usually good for their people, they're usually of indigenous descent, mestizo descent, generally people of color, black people, mestizos, all that good stuff. We don't like them. And OAS does away with them in some way, form, or fashion. So, Evo Morales was like, look, man, I know y'all playing the game, whatever, but if the OAS thinks our elections are illegitimate, then we'll just hold another one. I don't give a damn. I know I won. It's all good. And Evo Morales was more than happy to conduct another election. The Mesa, not Carlos Mendez. Carlos Mesa was his opposition. The opposition, Carlos Mesa, told Morales to not be a candidate in the new elections about where he was part of the election and actually won the election. Isn't that interesting? Hold on. I thought it was about election integrity. That's what they said, right? We have to annul the election results because the election results are disputed. But not just the opposition, but his opponent is like, oh, if you have any shred of patriotism, and that's a quote, then you would not be a candidate and you would step aside. Hold on, wait a minute. I thought it was about election integrity. It seems to me that Mr. Carlos Mesa and his opposition is more concerned specifically with getting Morales out the picture than holding free and fair elections. Now, as a brief aside, I do want to say this. I don't like when people are like, oh man, it's some crazy stuff happening in Bolivia. We should have, every country deserves free and fair elections. Yeah, we know. I think that everybody in this comment section agrees that everybody deserves free and fair elections. Here's the problem with that assertion. That assertion, it supposes that there weren't free and fair elections already. There were free and fair elections, and there was a coup attempt because of the results. So yeah, it's cool. And don't get me wrong, AOC so far, AOC is giving the best statement. She didn't just state obvious facts, even though it wasn't like what I would have given as a statement. However, it was a decently good statement. But everybody who has talked about this, which basically I think Ilhan Omar, AOC, Bernie Sanders, Tulsi said she's still doing her research on the situation, which I prefer because she doesn't get the half step like everybody else. They all said, oh man, this looks like what appears to be a military coup. Nah, bro, it's a military coup. It don't appear to be shit. It is a military coup. Every country deserves free and fair elections. Or Bolivia deserves free and fair elections. I'm calling an end to the political violence. Free and fair elections. Okay, that's cool. Violence sucks. Free and fair elections for everybody. Let's focus on the coup part. That's what we need to be focusing on. And that's why I would rather politicians make statements after they've done their research than to make statements just like they're like surveying the field, sticking their finger in the air, seeing which way the wind blows, and like, oh man, the left love this guy. I'm trying to win an election. I need to seem to be the most progressive. There isn't a 10-year established narrative against Morales like there has been against Maduro and Chavez and Venezuela in general. And therefore, I can make a super general statement. Everyone will just celebrate me just for saying some shit that does not get Evo Morales back in power, nor does it hold anybody accountable, nor does it indicate that you are trying to hold anybody accountable. Does that make sense? Am I being too harsh? I don't think so. So saying free and fair, they deserve free and fair elections, that's cool. I agree. But why don't we say what it actually happened? They had free and fair elections, and the right-wing U.S.-backed establishment did not like the results. And oh, by the way, they made it clear that they were never going to accept the results because there was always going to be a coup. that is what we should be focused on. And if politicians did their research instead of sticking their finger in the air, seeing which way the wind blows, I'm sticking my finger in front of my fan in case y'all can't see. Then we would have, I think that the country would have be in a much better place, and I would be more confident about our ability to handle the situation correctly. But right now, I feel like nobody has given the answer that satisfies my taste. I gave Bernie credit. At least Bernie spoke out. But once again, Bernie, for him to get Morales right and Lula right, but get Maduro horrifically and horrendously wrong, Chavez situation, he got that wrong too. It's like you got to wonder, well, why can you get Lula right and why can you get Morales right? When Morales knows that Maduro was an ally and knows that Lula was an ally and knows that the Mexican government is an ally, but Bernie can't seem to make the connection that clearly we're only going after anti-U.S. regime, anti-U.S. imperialist, socialist, pro people of color, pro human rights, pro nationalization of resources type of leaders. Like, that's the consistent pattern. And so I hope that Bernie recognizes this and says going forward, okay, now I'm starting to see what's really going on, so that he can get these issues better and get them right in the future. Because it's, once again, he's still the front runner. If he looks like he might be the Democratic primary candidate, and if he is, he will probably beat Trump. And I can't deal with Bernie accepting intelligence community narratives on this type of stuff, because it really does matter. Now here comes the fun part. With Venezuela, it was always about oil, right? With Brazil, shit, take your pick. Oil, because of where they're at, where their coast is. Sugarcane. I don't know if y'all know, that's a big thing out there. And the Amazons, I mean, literally with Brazil, the biggest problem with Brazil, honestly, was that it was going to be, if we let them, the biggest competition to the United States. And I'm not exactly sure that we could have won that competition outright. I know, right? Because that's how U.S. works, right? Got to be a winner and a loser. It can't be everybody wins. God forbid that happens. So with Colombia, it was oil as well. With Bolivia, however, it's a little bit different. It's lithium. And there was recently this boom for lithium prices. Now, what is lithium used for? Well, lithium is used to make batteries, to keep a long story short. But also, more specifically, lithium is used in batteries for electric vehicles. And this Green New Deal that we have been seeing pushed recently, that is even being supported by the Democratic establishment. Hell, Zach Levin of California, former fracking lobbyist, by the way, Kamala Harris and Kirsten Gillibrand, and unfortunately Bernie Sanders as well, introduced a bill lately that I have been blowing the whistle on, that Fiorella and Pasta have been blowing the whistle on as well, that was weirdly specific in saying, we got to transition to electric vehicles now. We have to do it now. We got to start taking it. I was like, okay, this is really uncomfortable for me, guys. But in order to fill the fuel cells for those batteries, you have to do a little bit of fracking, a lot of it actually, which is, I guess it's no surprise then that once again, Zach Levin, who introduced the bill, is a former fracking lobbyist. Pretty sure it's pure coincidence. And so I tweeted out the other day. Actually, I'm gonna see if I can pull that tweet up. I'm gonna see if I can pull it up, because I want to make this is why you gotta look at established patterns. I just looked up the main resource. Before I even did a super deep dive into this entire issue, all I did was look up the main resource of Bolivia, and I drew this conclusion. Hold on. I should have had this in advance. I know. I suck. Like I said, there was a lot going on that day. Or a lot going on with this information. Okay. This is my Twitter thread from 11:49 p.m. on November 10th before I looked up any of this information. Just so you know, you can go back and look at this before I looked up any of this shit. And it's going to be even crazier when you actually hear the information that I'm about to present. This is my Twitter thread. Bolivia has the largest lithium supply in the world. We're currently in an unspoken renewable energy race. We, as in the United States. And I said corporations are trying to monopolize renewables first before the people, before the actual transition into renewable energy. For electric cars, you need batteries. For batteries, you need lithium. You need batteries for everything, obviously, but the car industry will literally rely on lithium supply. So whatever country has access to the most lithium will dominate the future of the automotive industry once the transition from fossil fuels is complete. So that was before I read any of this information. Okay? Firstly, let me pull this back up. This is from September 17th, 2018, from Reuters. A boom in electric vehicles has boosted prices for components of lithium-ion batteries, including lithium cobalt, as customers, such as car companies, scramble to secure supplies. But lithium prices in 2018 came under pressure because miners have ramped up production, consumers destocked supplies, and subsidies in China's new energy vehicles market have been pulled back. But guess who is still the number one consumer of lithium in the world? Oh, you don't gotta guess. It is China. Prices in China, the world's biggest consumer of lithium, plunged to $13,000 per ton in August of 2018 from a peak of $24,000 in March of 2018, according to prices tracked monthly by the benchmark mineral intelligence. Uh-oh. It's about to get good. So, if China is the world's largest consumer of lithium, I wonder who would get a leg up in this little trade war we're having with China if we had control over Bolivia's lithium supply. I wonder. Now, currently, China consumes 63% of the market. With its ferocious appetite for lithium, the Asian giant has positioned itself at the center of the world's main deposits of the metal. By 2025, this is still an article in 2018. Okay, so this is how long this has been a dispute. By 2025, China will need 800,000 tons of lithium to carbonate. Seems to me like if you want to win this trade war in the middle of a renewable energy race, then you might need some lithium, won't you? Let's see how that might play out. All right, China has already taken a 24% stake in the Chilean producer SQM last December, placing itself inside the lithium's triangle, which has 80% of the world's entire supply of lithium. The lithium triangle is Chile. Oh yeah, I told you it's gonna get good. Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina. Remember this. Chile, Bolivia, Argentina. China already has a 24% stake in Chilean lithium. So remember, it's important. Bolivia dramatically ramping up production of lithium to cope with soaring global demand for the prized electric battery metal. This was an article in September 2019. Bolivia is now sitting on the world's largest lithium reserves. Funny enough, Chile, once again, is part of the lithium triangle. Now, before, Bolivia did not have the capacity to produce metal at a large scale. Now, that was supposed to change when the LIP, quote unquote, plant, which is a lithium producer, if you will, comes online. And guess what year? This plant was about to come online and allow Bolivia to tap in to their vast supply of lithium. Guess what year? Not 2017, not 2018, not 2019, but 2020. Oh shit, that's like 2 months from now, huh? Interesting. In 2008, Evo Morales nationalized the lithium supply by creating the state company Yacimientos de Litio Bolivianos, or YLB for short, with aims to make Bolivia the fourth largest producer of lithium in the world by 2021. Oh, what? You're trying to tell me that you want to nationalize a primary resource? Oh, no. You better ask Chavez and Maduro about what we do to people who try to nationalize their oil supply or their natural resources. You better ask Assad about what we try to do to people who try to nationalize their resources. You better ask Iran and Mossadegh what we do to people who try and nationalize their resources. Oh, you can't stay in power, dog. You are not allowed to stay in power. You got to go. That's what happens. So, China's Xinjiang TBEA group came on board with YLB, once again, the Yacimientos de Litio Bolivianos, which is a state-ran lithium producer, in a joint venture. They came together in a joint venture in February 2019. So, hold up. If they came together in a joint venture in February 2019, that means that China has their hands in both Chile's lithium supply and Bolivia's lithium supply. Oh, but it gets better. In September, Morales announced for Solar de Uyuni, one of Bolivia's lithium deposit regions, they actually said they have more than double the lithium deposit that they originally thought they had. Oh, yeah. A lot of money to be made there, huh? Now, Albemarle. What is Albemarle? Because I know a lot of people are like, well, where's the U.S. in this whole thing, right? Albemarle is the world's largest lithium mining company. And guess where it's based at? In the United States. And guess what, guys? They've actually been taking a pretty significant financial hit over the last year because of an oversupply of lithium. But, not that many people are buying. More specifically, who have we been in a trade war with? The largest consumer of lithium in the world, China. So of course there's an oversupply. You pissed off the largest consumer in the world. And of course their stocks hit. Now, what's even more interesting is that, surprisingly enough, although Albemarle has a mining contract with Chile, they do not have a mining contract with Bolivia. So in other words, China has their hands in both Bolivia and Chile lithium supply, which makes batteries for electric cars, which are the future, and whatever industry has control over these is about to control the entire car manufacturing industry. China has their hands in 2 out of the 3 countries in the lithium triangle, the United States only has one, and that's in Chile. Oh, but there's a problem. There's a problem. See, in Chile, in 2018, the company Albemarle's plans were rejected by environmental regulators. According to Albemarle's website, the only South American country they have access to the mine is in, or to the mining of lithium is in Chile. But those regulators said that their environmental standards weren't up to par, and therefore their plans for expansion in Chile in the tank. While China is doing pretty damn well in both Chile and Bolivia. America just can't seem to catch a break because Trump's a fucking dumbass. Art of the deal, my ass. So to make matters worse for Albemarle, like I just said, we only have access to one lithium mine or one lithium deposit in South America. But what has been taking place over the last couple of weeks that the media has not been wanting to talk about, but luckily Pasta and Fiorella of the MCSC network and a couple of others have taken time out of their busy schedules to cover this. What has been taking place? Protests. Massive protests in Chile against the billionaire right-wing government. And guess what them protesters are privy to? They also know who this guy is really working for. So in the middle of their protests, they decided to take a little trip over to the lithium deposit that Albemarle, the United States company, mines at. And guess what they're doing right now? Albemarle ain't mining a damn thing because the protesters are blocking it. Right now, it's happening right now. Oh yeah. Now, if you know, like I know, these protests in Chile, because the president already had to demand that all of his cabinet resign, but the protests have not calmed. So what is likely about to happen? I think that we all know what's about to happen. And I think that the United States, although they're stupid as hell, sometimes the leadership can be stupid. They know, they see the writing on the wall. And that writing says, this man is not about to, he ain't about to be president for much longer. He is not about to be president for much longer. So we're about to lose potentially our lithium deposit in Chile. We don't have a lithium deposit in anywhere else in the lithium triangle. And China has lithium deposits in both. But if protesters had decided to block lithium mining for China and Chile, they do have access, however, to lithium mining in Bolivia still. So they won't be hurt like the United States will be hurt. Oh, but it gets deeper. Oh, yes, it always gets deeper, doesn't it? Now, there was another convenient event that happened right before this coup. Right before it, okay? Now, the coup comes after Morales shut down a lithium deal with ACISA, a multinational corporation. Now, I'm not going to go into the crazy details, but it's a German-based company. But it's like one of our, kind of like our proxies. Okay. Now, the reason why Morales shut down this deal it's simple. It's the same reason every socialist leader shuts down every deal with multinational corporations. He said that lithium is for Bolivians, and the profits are for Bolivians, not the rest of the world, not for multinational corporations. Now, we don't like that. We don't like that. Now, who does this company, what do they do? They provide batteries, okay? Specifically, they provide batteries for car companies, okay? Now, it isn't just any car companies they provide batteries for. They provide batteries for electric car companies. Ain't that many of those that primarily dabble in electric cars. But they specifically supply batteries for Tesla. like I said, it gets deep. Okay. Days in advance of the coup, the investment analyst or the investment analyst and publisher, Argur, that's what they're called, Argur, told investors, hey man, y'all need to keep an eye out on this situation in Bolivia. Why? Because Evo Morales warned the world that there was about to be a coup attempt. I repeat, once again, because of recordings that show that the United States, through Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, and the establishment of the United States Embassy in Bolivia, knew that there was going to be a coup. He knew there was going to be a coup. He warned the world, and a stock analyst, like a magazine or a publication, if you will, they said, hey man, y'all better watch out for the situation in Bolivia. He told investors that. And guess what happened the moment the coup in Bolivia was successful? Tesla stocks skyrocketed. So as usual, ladies and gentlemen, to make a long story, very, very long story, as short as possible, follow the money. That's where it goes. That's what always happens. Because we couldn't, for some reason, China could, do this thing that we tend to do. At least I thought was what it was called in business, right? You negotiate. And they did these things that the United States is kind of unfamiliar with. They're called bilateral agreements. In other words, both parties, for the most part, equally benefit from the financial engagement. Okay? For the financial relationship. See, that's what China did. China was like, hey, man, we want to be friends with y'all. I got a lot of lithium, and we want to give y'all an even spot. We don't want all of it. We just want 24%. Cool. Let's do it, man. That's more than reasonable. Y'all consume a lot, too, and you're not trying to take over our country. You're not interfering in our political affairs. That's fine, man. It's called a bilateral agreement. But the United States doesn't know how to fucking do that. We don't know how to do that. And so to punish Bolivia for reaching bilateral, reasonable agreements with China, we got to overthrow their goddamn government and try to take complete and total control over their lithium supply. Because, well, let's be honest. What does it always come down to? Capitalism, and I tell people this all the time, capitalism has never been about competition. That was a lie. It's just like when your economics 101 class, you know what they're going to tell you? The first thing they're going to tell you, resources are scarce, and that's the reason for the economy. That's a lie. Resources are actually not scarce. They're really, really not. We manufacture scarcity to control pricing so that certain people can benefit and others cannot. That's what actually happens. Resources are not scarce. Okay, so let me just go ahead and be clear about that. Some resources can be scarce, but if we do it the right way, for example, like to make paper, right? If we're using trees, then yeah, resources are scarce. It takes a long time for trees to grow. But if you're using hemp, which you can grow all the time, year round, then resources are not that scarce, are they? But once again, if you use hemp, then who would be hurt by that? The tobacco industry. So you get what I'm saying, people? Resources aren't really scarce. We just pretend like they're scarce. And capitalism has shown us in the past, because think about it. For oil, for example, we have a relationship with Saudi Arabia. They love us. We even make our own oil. 93% our own oil. Obama bragged about it. So why are we so concerned with Venezuela? Why are we so concerned with Syria? Why are we so concerned with Iran? Because, despite popular belief, we don't want the competition. That's what it comes down to. Because if we have competition, then people might decide who to get their oil from based off of who treats them with basic dignity, a certain level of respect. And the United States ain't about, we can't respect you and overthrow your governments. We can't do both. Come on. That's ridiculous. So what we do is we try and choke everybody out of the market in various ways, overthrow governments and control every supply because we're an empire. That's right. We're a fucking empire. That's what we do. That's what empires do. That's like the first rule of war. You choke out the resources and the economies of other nations. Technically, what we're doing right now is like we're conducting a siege of Bolivia. But because our name isn't front and center, because the United States isn't front and center, it's seemingly like, oh, it's just a bunch of civil unrest and political violence. No, it is not just some random, political unrest that just came about by happenstance. That's not what happened. It was orchestrated. It was always about their resources. We need them to remain poor. And if you're going to get rich, you damn sure can't get rich off of the lithium supply that we need to monopolize the renewable energy race going forward. There you go. So this is partially over resources, not partially. It's absolutely over resources. It is about right-wing power and right-wing power brokers. It's about United States imperialism, once again. And it does not have anything to do with the Supreme Court decision. That's a right-wing talking point and is a mainstream media talking point. It is a way to muddy the waters. That's what it is about. Okay? There was somebody trying to say, and they're normally a cool guy, but they were like, oh, Morales is stealing the money of Bolivians. He's liquidating the lithium. Hold on. He created an institution so that the state could then profit off the lithium and then give it the money back to the people. And he's been in charge of Bolivia's largest economic rise in history. It seems like he's doing what he said he was going to do. And then when some multinational corporation tried to come in and take the lithium, he stopped it from happening. So once again, what you're hearing are lies. It's not the truth. What you're hearing from the mainstream, what you're hearing from people trying to muddy the water. It is what it is. Also, Donald Trump, you're a damn idiot. Why did you start a trade war with China? Why? For what reason? If anybody is wondering why we're constantly trying to demonize China, I don't necessarily agree with everything in China. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with everything that happens in China. But I don't judge. I try not to. I feel like that Americans have this level of narcissism where we feel every country has to practice the same exact value system as we do. If not, then they bad, we good. But I live in a country where we literally had an election stolen from us, and we're not in the streets like the Chileans. We're not in the streets like the Lebanese protesters. We're not in the streets like Hondurans in the past. And y'all want to pretend like we have a value system. No, we would like to sit on our fucking high horse and pretend like we should be put on a pedestal because we get placated by being given a little bit of food. We get a little bit. They're like, hey, well, we're pissed that our elections got stolen from us. Bernie Sanders was cheated. Hey, hold on real quick. Did you know a new PlayStation just came out? Hey, we got you. Have some. Hey, did you know that new MacBook just came out? Hey, I know you couldn't afford the iPhone before, but hey, it's cool. We do payment plans now. And you can get an iPhone and an Apple Watch. It's cool. Here you go, man. Don't worry about that stuff. Don't get out into the street. If you get out into the street, you might miss work. If you miss work, you don't get paid. If you don't get paid, you don't get all this cool stuff that you like to have. That's what happens. So we try to pretend like we have this super strong value system. Just like we're morally and ethically correct on all issues, and yet we don't even take care of our own system and still pretend like we care about what happens in someone else's. The only time we care about what happens in someone else's system is when the mainstream tells us it's a big deal. Trump was an idiot to start a trade war with China. We could have negotiated. Why is it that we make it that everyone has to be an adversary or an ally? It can't just be, hey man, Get it how you live. I know if some of my people who watch the show are from the hood, you understand what I'm saying? Get it how you live mean I worry about me, you worry about you. When we can mutually benefit from the relationship, from a business relationship, from an economic relationship, from a military relationship, whatever, then we can work together. But that does not mean there always has to be a winner and a loser. We have so much money in this world. We have so much money in this world. There are so many supplies. There are so many resources. Every country, every region has unique ways that it can help the rest of the world. And yet we feel like we have to pick winners and losers, that we have to pick allies and adversaries. That is why we're going to lose. The United States cannot keep this up. China, you think that this shit's only happening in South America? Oh, no. China is also working in a lot of countries in Africa. And that shit does not get talked about. China is also about to start dabbling in the Middle East. And that shit does not get talked about. We're losing the trade war. And it never had to be a war to begin with. It never had to be a war to begin with. But these people, you have to remember, these politicians, and let me be clear about something. That's on the left as well. And we've seen this time and time again, where we feel like the only way we can get people on our side is if we tell them how bad the other side is. Even if it may not be true. Even if it is unproductive for us to do so. We have to demonize somebody. Or at least that's how Americans think, because that's how we've been conditioned. Like, if I praise Tulsi, that must mean I hate Bernie. Or if I love Bernie or I praise Bernie, that must mean I'm undermining Tulsi. Or if I, call out Trump, that must mean I hate America. For some people, some Trump supporters are like that. It can't just be, well, I like Tulsi. Well, I like Bernie. I like what he did there. It can't just be, well, I like Yang's UBI. Well, not Yang's version of UBI, but I like UBI. So I'll give him credit there. I think that we can work on making it better, but I like UBI. Oh, or when the question in the debate stage, is it UBI or federal jobs guarantee? And I think that I feel like everybody who has a rational thought process, who wasn't in a tribal, like a tribalist camp that night, we were all like, why does it got to be either? Why can't we have both again? I'm confused. Why can't we have federal jobs guarantee and UBI? And I feel like to make one work, you need the other. Why can't it be both again? And then once you say that to most of the supporters on either side, they're like, oh shit, really? I didn't think about that. Oh shit, oh yeah, that's right. You got to snap them out of there. It's my candidate. No, it's my candidate's plan. No, it's my candidate's plan. It can't be. You got to take them out of that because we're conditioned to be adversarial. So instead of working with China, because we can't, by the way, climate change is a big deal. Can't deal with climate change unless we work with who? China. Can't have, we can't, oil supplies, our oil prices will go up if we don't go kill everybody in the Middle East. That's what'll happen. We gotta go get them. Why can't we just work with everybody? I mean, these are necessary resources for basic productivity. Like a lot of places you live, you can't do nothing without a vehicle. You can't do anything without gas. If you have a vehicle, or you need a vehicle. Why not just work with everybody? Everybody's going in some way, form, or fashion. However the vehicles are powered in the future, it's going to require batteries. Whether or not it be lithium or solar, it's going to require batteries. We all know we're going to need it. So why not just work with everybody? Let your economy be built from the inside and use services. However, you can do international services. That's the way. If you want to have an advantage in a service-based economy, like a service-based international economy, nobody gets killed in a service-based international dispute when it comes to your economy. Hey, man, I wanted to be an international tour guide. Oh, no, that's my turf. I'm the international tour guide here, bro. Well, we got to start throwing up sets, cuz. We got to scrap over this because this... Nobody knows Rio de Janeiro like me. Nobody's going to fucking go to war over an international service-based economy. But you will go over international resources based off the sole lie that resources are scarce. Because otherwise, these corporations can't gouge the fuck out of us unless they've convinced the world that resources are scarce. With all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much. Hold on, let me make sure I get no super chats. I got 2. Sorry about that. Shane Mora, thank you for your comprehensive coverage. Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Niko, isn't lithium a psychiatric drug also? Are pharmaceutical companies involved in this also maybe? It seems like it would help them. I did not know that. I will do more research into it, though. I will do more research into it. So, yeah. That's going to be it for today. But I greatly appreciate you all for sticking around. And if you have if we get any breaking news updates about this, of course, we will bring it to you. I think Sophia is going to cover something regarding the situation. Posse and Fiorella from the Combo Couch are going to do the same. So you're going to get a lot of Bolivia. You're going to get a lot of holes plugged for you. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream segment of Mikasa Sukasa. And always remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.